Welcome to Black Angus Reviews. For anyone curious, this second comic review is inspired by Jeff Hicks at World Class Bullshitters, who I took up on the suggestion and was totally blown away. And hey, rookie critic, spoilers, this has old Spider-Man like we talked about. Word timing, huh? Spider-Man Reign, released in 2006, is written by Care Andrews and follows an old Spider-Man in the near dystopian future. The book opens to a clever progression of a spider going up a waterspout, only to be washed away by rain, a parallel to the new authoritarian police force, Reign, assuming power in the absence of Spider-Man. It's 30 years in the future, and Spider-Man has long been retired. We find him working as a florist, having trouble in old age managing his work, just like when he tried juggling work and Spider-Man, and is subsequently fired for what we see as another costly mistake on an order. Meanwhile, the news outlet Daily Bugle informs people that in celebration of a decade-long span without superpowered crime, the mayor will soon release a new laser security system called the Web. Given the fear of terrorist interference, the mayor suspends the electoral process to install the Web sooner. We also learn he has Kingpin at his disposal to torment, now decrepit and sustained via IV. In the home of old Peter Parker, we see a lonely old man constantly confronting Mary Jane, a figment of his imagination now, as we learn it's been 10 years since he last engaged with her. Yet her memory torments and preoccupies his mind all the same. Just as he awakens from a dream of her, J. Jonah Jameson arrives with a package which turns out to be an old camera and his black Spider-Man mask. Being forced out, Jameson begins to incite violence by vandalizing a car in front of Reign officers, who begin to assault him. All the while, we see Peter transfixed on the mask, recalling in his mind the sound and feeling that remains constant every time it's donned. All of a sudden, Spider-Man emerges, masked and only in his undies, saving JJ. It's then that we discover Spider-Man took blame for a perceived murder, and constantly questions his responsibility in the deaths of Aunt May, Mary Jane, and Uncle Ben, and even now may be questioning his influence on JJ. We also realize that Jameson sold the Daily Bugle after his discovery of libel against Spider-Man. Sometime later, Jameson is peddling his print while yelling at the world to awaken to the truth. In the era of the Reign, Jameson's print is deemed illegal. While the public is informed of the Web being ahead of schedule, we see the mayor and his assistant Sax worried at the resurgence of Spider-Man, however old he may be. And so they release the Sinner Six: Electro, Mysterio, Kraven the Hunter, the Sandman, Scorpion, and Hydro Man from prison, making a deal of freedom in exchange for the defeat of Spider-Man. At the same time, Peter's in a hurry to leave before the Web goes into effect, yet Mary Jane ignores him much to his anger. He decides to shave to hide his identity better, and cuts himself repeatedly, noting the pain and the blood. Not only is this symbolic of Peter painfully re-emerging as Spider-Man, but is reminiscent with a contract with God, as both characters seem to evolve with shaving a way to convey that change. While this is happening, we return to a girl we first met tagging a wall and running from rain, has now come across Jameson, preaching in an abandoned church. Casey, another child, then hacks the city's TVs and streams Jameson's message to New York. As Peter is readying to leave, he realizes a crowd forming, since Jameson has doxed Spider-Man's whereabouts, which leads Reign officers to blast his apartment. During this time, the elderly hypno-hustler has come out of hiding to aid his former opponent, trying to hypnotize Reign, but fails and dies. In this moment, Jameson is discovered by Reign and attacked. While a riot begins to start between bystanders and Reign, Spider-Man appears and begins thwarting the Reign, but is quickly counteracted, as the Sinner Six have joined in, Kraven the Hunter even killing young Casey and letting the hack continue. Spider-Man is subsequently ravaged by the Six when suddenly, amid a mental note of Deus Ex Machina and its Greek playwright origins, the tentacles of Doc Ock save Spider-Man from death. Otto has programmed his quote-unquote 4 sons with a final task of finding Spider-Man, take him to the trio of graves of Mary Jane, Ben, and Aunt May, where he confronts his demons, most notably the mysterious death of MJ, who we learn died from cancer she contracted from long-term exposure to Peter, as he's filled with radioactive blood. As Peter confronts his demons, the Web is activated, and the city is now on lockdown. The Ring brings Jameson to the mayor, and after an initial attack by Waters, Jameson stabs the mayor, but it proves unfatal. He then attacks Sax, who we come to learn is Venom. In this reveal, the reader may also become a bit sympathetic to the mayor, since it appears he had no idea about the nature of Sax. We then cut to news coverage of the Webb Tower, where it appears an explosion has taken place, soon clarified to be a flood of symbiotes attacking a now captive city. Back at the graveyard, Peter emerges reborn from the casket, where he secretly buried his red and blue suit with Mary Jane. As he returns to the city, Sax, or Venom, calls back the Sinister Six to prepare for their battle with the Spider. In conjunction with this, the remaining population has figured out bells keep the symbiotes at bay, and come to a standstill with Rain and the Sandman. The unknown girl we see throughout the story confronts Sandman, and we learn while she's under gunfire that she is the daughter of Sandman, as she turns herself to stone. In shock at this realization, Sandman attacks the Rain and tries to aid the girl in pulling her body back together. Spider-Man makes it back to the city and begins his trek up the tower, taking out the counterproductive duo of Electro and Hydro Man. Scorpion tries as well and is quickly vanquished to a fatal fall. He then comes across Mysterio, who uses hallucinogenic toxin on Spidey, which make him appear as a brutal Mary Jane, and says about the only funny thing in the book, quote, "Do not dress up like a dead man's wife, not unless he pays you to." How many hashtag literally shakings would that get today? Let me know in the comments. He lastly faces Kraven, with the toxin having taken full effect. He directly engages all his past demons through the form of Kraven, knocking him out and covering him in web, an ironic fate for a villain aiding the web launch. Finally, Spidey faces the final foe, Venom, vengeful for Spider-Man abandoning him. Spider-Man takes out a few symbiotes and leads them to the top of the tower. There, he meets Sandman, who gives him the detonator, activating the 6 bombs implanted in the Sinner Six, much like the Suicide Squad. The book ends with Jameson having resumed a media presence in the news, and Peter, having visited the grave of Mary Jane, noting that until he joins her, he has responsibilities. One reading Spider-Man Reign can instantly note the stark similarities of it to the iconic Dark Knight Returns, a story of a once great hero long and abandoned from his previous hero days, finding it necessary to come back to save their city. What's different, though, is the use of such an optimistic character. Even when Spidey is near death in his endeavors, he's making wisecracks. Marvel was aware of the similarities to The Dark Knight Returns, and even released Spider-Man Reign during the 20th anniversary of it. On top of that similarity, I found the plot of the villain is very similar to the subversion of government infrastructure in The Dark Knight Returns by Bane, a sort of completing the circle of copycatting between Marvel and DC. J. Jonah Jameson is utilized to convey the overarching theme and argument at the peak of the Iraq War post 9/11. That being how we respond to terror, with the answer seemingly being to fear ever sacrificing freedoms to achieve security, a classic power corrupts tale. With the inclusion of the symbiote mask and the subsequent shedding of it for the tried and true blue and red suit, we see a metaphor of power in Peter that reflects what one in power must always be prepared to do, to shed some power to avoid corruption. As far as the media goes in Spider-Man Reign, I see a lot of similarities in how today's media is. Regardless of political leaning, it seems that today's news seems to support and even applaud the stripping of personal freedoms for the sake of a perceived security. Besides the art's unappealing style, I found its direction really evoked a grim tale for the reader, and properly conveyed the emotions and direction of each character. One question I have for the story is, why didn't Spidey utilize Doc Ock's tentacles? Couldn't they unattach since they're functioning with a dead body at the center? That would make the fight against multiple symbiotes more believable, as Peter is like 60 plus. Closing, I'd like to again thank Jeff Hicks for the suggestion. This is a much better alternative take on Spider-Man than the initial 3-volume run of Miles Morales, the only other Spider-Man I've read thus far. I'd like to thank all the viewers. If you're new, don't only sub to me, but Jeff the Iron Wolf and the Rookie Critic. Together, we form the Cinema Squad, the Fandom Menace Phase 2. A collective podcast that meets every other Sunday for a roundtable of pop culture talk and recent developments in entertainment. Episode 2 is linked below, and Episode 3 will be on the Iron Wolf's channel November 4th. I'm Black Angus. Have a great night.
Sun.